Hello and welcome to EPR with your favorite environmental enthusiasts, Nic and Laura. On today's episode, Laura and I discuss when nature calls. We talk to Kris Covey about trees, applied ecology, and the soil inventory project. And finally, there are no traffic lights in Bhutan because everyone apparently just drives very safely. Another fun fact, the country has never been conquered, and they were also the last country to introduce TV way back in 1998. But how about that? So yeah, hit that music. NAEP is hosting its next free webinar on climate justice on an international stage, prelude to COP28 and implications for industry on December 15th, 2023, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. Join Chris Whitehead, Sonny Fleming, and Maya Carrasquillo for this informative event as we discuss what is climate justice, what actions are being taken on the topic, walk through a few case studies to show the importance of mapping these impacts, and plot a path forward to minimize risk of impact. Check it out at www.naep.org. Let's get to our segment. I mean, I had to go in the woods. I remember I even had like one of my field assistants with me. I was like, hey, you should keep going.
Listen, yes, this is the conversation for today. So,
yeah,
it's not fair. Men can do lots of things out in the field. Women don't have the opportunity to do.
Oh, she could have been fine with me, but yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. It's much easier. I have
a friend who was in the field in Florida, and not a tree in sight, no hills in sight. Out with a bunch of clients, dudes. What are you going to do? Like, the guys are just like, all right, everybody look the other way. It doesn't work for girls.
Yeah.
So she actually went down the side of a bank towards a stream and then, is like squatting ready. And then, oh, hi, alligator. Like,
oh, gosh. Yeah.
On top of it all, can be dangerous.
Yeah, no, it's best to work in the forest for this exact reason because it's much, much easier to hide. And then later you're like, wow, this bear pooped in the woods. That's so crazy. I don't know. Guess we got to be careful for those,
Yep. Been in the field with guys on boats and they just go off the back. Nobody look over here.
Yeah.
Very convenient for y'all.
I know it. True. You're not wrong. I have nothing to say other than you're right.
But that is to say, if maybe you're new to working in the field, like Sam's new to working in the field. It's been your experience so far. Anything happen?
For going potty?
Yeah.
It's part of the reason why I don't really like field work because I'm very comfortable with bathrooms.
Right. You like those a lot. Yeah, most people do.
Luckily, when I have gone, there's no urges. So good.
Good so far.
Yes. Probably because I starve myself because I'm not hungry.
That's funny. Well, yeah. So you do field work in a forest versus a desert, for example. There's some difference, but like they both have like, hills and such.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always a place to go hide. And I just remember it's getting, the deserts, those are hot. It's so hot. And I just remember like doing my business, using the bathroom, and then like being like, did I do anything here? It evaporated almost immediately. It was instantaneous and it was just gone. And I'm like, man, this place needs some water. I guess we are in the desert,
When
it's like a full day field effort, you kind of have to, right? You can't not.
Yeah.
You're out there for hours
on
end.
Butt by a snake or something.
Has that ever happened to me?
No, I think one of our guests that was one of her field notes.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I haven't even, I mean, I've seen snakes in the field, but I haven't seen any like that I would be concerned about. I almost stepped on a copperhead. That's unfair. I did almost do that. But
I mean, for me, the worst was like boat runs, and they could run 8-9 hours sometimes. And in the summer, you can get in the water. In the winter, cold, raining. And then the worst is like, girls have certain days of the that it's not pleasant to be in the field for more than a couple of hours, but nobody asks you or cares. You have work to do, and those days can be uber challenging.
Oh, sure.
And we won't share stories here on the show, but I've talked to other women about their experiences, and you guys don't know what we do to get the work done in the field.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. Idea. I don't. And that's okay. Yeah.
So those of you listening, like girls out there, if you're having some issues, talk to some other chicks. We've been there.
That's funny. I think even one of our program managers is actually collecting data on women in the field, that exact thing, trying to get an answer for like, what do we need to make it easier for women to work in the field?
That's cool.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool.
Bathrooms everywhere.
Yeah.
Problem solved.
Bathrooms everywhere, duh. Yeah. Just put a porta potty in the desert. I'm sure that'll be fine.
All right, cool. Well, let's get to our interview.
All right. Hello and welcome back to EPR. Today we have Kris Covey, Assistant Professor of Environmental Studies and Sciences at Skidmore College and the co-founder and president of the Soil Inventory Project on the show. Welcome, Kris.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Can you start by telling us a little bit about your career path that led you to becoming an assistant professor in environmental studies?
Yeah, a windy path for me. I went up to college on the northern edge of the Adirondacks. I started at a place, SUNY Canton, 2-year technical college, and I got interested in physics. I started doing a physics degree there. I finished up at SUNY Potsdam and pretty quickly realized there aren't a lot of jobs for people to drop balls and tell you how long it'll take for them to fall. So I worked as a carpenter for a while. I was a whitewater kayaker for a little while. Oh, wow. And then I got a job on the Hudson River dredging project. I was working in their core processing lab and going in the middle of the night to this facility in Fort Edward and putting on Tyvek and cleaning out PCB filled sediment from tubes at 3 a.m, and that was great. And a job came available to be a 7th and 8th grade science teacher and to teach high school environmental science. And I started teaching and it was amazing. I loved it. And that environmental science class had sort of, kids who had taken biology and chemistry and wanted another science before they went off to college. And then it had kids that had failed biology or chemistry and needed another science to graduate, right? Oh, and that's in the same, right? That's in the same class with 12 kids. So I was like, we need a project. They need to do something.
Yeah.
And so we started building a campus arboretum where kids were growing green space trees and planting them out in the community as green space trees and designing this arboretum and working with sort of local green skills groups. And then I realized that I liked working with the trees a lot more than I liked talking to people's parents. As a parent, I can assure you that we're awful people. And so I went back to grad school and I had the good fortune of having a mother-in-law who had been at the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies in New Haven. And I would not ever have thought to try and apply to a place like that. But she brought me around and introduced me to folks there. And they said, what a cool project. What are you thinking about doing next? And I said, I'd like to be a forester. And so I went to graduate school for forestry and did a bunch of research just on the side of a Master of Forestry and realized I really liked doing research. And so I did a PhD. And then I went looking for a small liberal arts college close to home. And my wife and I were both my wife grew up in Saratoga and went to Skidmore College. And I grew up about 15 minutes north in Queensbury, New York. And so this was, the job, a visiting position came up. I got lucky. I got that. And then was lucky enough to be in a position where I could stay. And so here I am living this life I could not have imagined.
Right. Golly. And it's a lot I love the idea. It's the reason we asked the question, right? Is there's so many different things that come into play with who you are as a person, right? Whether it's whitewater rafting and then this project that you come up with and then grad school and then where you are now. I guess like going back to your teaching days, because are you still teaching in a way now as well?
Oh, yes. Skidmore is very much a teaching institution and I have an active research program, but the wonderful thing here is that my colleagues, the institution, are all directed towards investment in young people. And so I'm regularly teaching. I'm on a research leave right now. I'm on my pre-tenure sabbatical, but I am all the time with students. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So how does that experience you had with 7th and 8th grade science. I actually once, I taught biology to art students. So I understand sometimes you get people who are really passionate and some people who are not. So how did that experience kind of inform how you teach now?
Yeah, it's funny, when you're at the 7th and 8th grade level, so much of what you're doing is about classroom control, right? Mm-hmm. About pacing and keeping people engaged. And I remember going into, when you teach 7th and 8th grade science in the state of Massachusetts, the curriculum it's everything. It's from cellular level to planetary motion. It's all of this stuff. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, well, what did I learn in 7th and 8th grade? And I don't know about you, Nic or Laura, but I didn't remember anything. I didn't remember a thing that I learned in school, but I did remember a math teacher that I really enjoyed and a science teacher that I really enjoyed. And I remembered the idea that I really liked being in that class and learning in that class. Right. So whatever it was they were teaching was just setting me up to get to 9th grade. And that was setting me up to get to 10th grade. And that was putting me in a position to understand the basics of and love the idea of physics, which then gets me to go to college and study physics. Right. And so I think what I took most away from that is that the content is one thing. You really want students to learn how to think and how to think about the world. And the subject matter is a path to that. But also that the goal is that we're enjoying ourselves while we're doing this, because that is going to energize you to want to learn the next thing and to dig into the next idea. And I'm not sure if I had started trying to teach adults, young adults, college students, this is the end of youth, right? Right. That's the way to think about it. I guess I shouldn't say that, but when you go in and you're with 7th and 8th graders, you're very much thinking, what is it that I have for you? Why is it that you are going to sit in your chair and get excited and produce something that is, and it's largely about making sure that they're having a good time doing what they're doing.
Right. And so, yeah, that's funny. Yeah, the end of youth, the title of the episode. I'm just kidding. Totally kidding. But that's really cool. That is really neat. I love the perspective there. That's funny because you have these projects and these moments in your life that kind of stick with you as you go along. And I think one of the things that we saw that we would love to ask you about is your master's work in Bhutan. What was that? What did you do? How does that relate to what you're doing now?
Yeah, that was another amazing sort of stumbling situation and links up really nicely with the 7th and 8th grade science. So I, at the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies, now Yale School of the Environment, they have this wonderful program called MODS, which was short for summer modules, which was a legacy of when the field foresters would spend an entire summer at camp learning field skills. And it got sort of revived in the 1980s as a way to bring a class together and build community at the onset. And so you go out for, 3 weeks, they mix up the groups, you go to these different sites and you just do stuff in the field with the folks you're going to be working on a master's with for the next 2 years. And so it's 100 and whatever people. And, one of the things that we did was macroinvertebrate stream sampling.
Oh, yeah.
So look at the effects of sort of the urban environment on these urban streams around New Haven. Yeah. And we go out and I had done that with 7th and 8th graders. And I didn't belong at Yale. The people I was there, they've come back from the Peace Corps. They founded these big nonprofits. They've worked up on Capitol Hill. They've done all these amazing things that are from all over the world where, what does it take to get from I grew up with a dirt floor in Nepal to I'm studying and doing my master's at Yale, right? So I'm not in a league with these folks, but we're doing this macroinvertebrate sampling and there was this guy, Mo Mint, and Mo was just so impressed that I could identify these macroinvertebrates. And he said, gosh, Kris Covey, you are just so smart, and of course, it's just, I was doing a 7th and 8th grade lab with, it was pretty hilarious. And Mo had been running with one of the professors at Yale, the National Forest Inventory for the country of Bhutan. Wow. And so, when he knew I was really interested in forestry and that I was spending a lot of time up in the woods and we would casually bump into each other and spend time together, Mo would say, you should really come to Bhutan. They could use your expertise, which is hilarious.
Right.
But, in a place like Yale, the resources are there, the connections are there. And I hopped on a plane and I went to a research center in Bhutan and spent I was there for about 3 months, did a bunch of field work, saw amazing things I would have never imagined. And we put together a nice study of, disturbance dynamics in these amazing Himalayan oak forests.
Gee whiz. Wow. That is so cool. I'm afraid to ask you.
Interject here for a second. I think that's amazing that you think or thought you didn't fit in, because, when I'm career coaching, I hear this all the time. People think they don't belong, or they think that even if they start a new job or something, or in the university that they're at or program that they're considering going into, they all just have these perceived shortcomings. And you just don't know what your path is and what that one thing you might bring to the table is, or no one else has. You don't have to be best at everything. There might just be one little thing that you're needed for, and that's why you're there.
Yeah. I think that is so important. And I was actually thinking about it yesterday, and thinking about, I had reconnected with a former mentor recently, and we were going to hop on another project together, and thinking about all the things we had done together. And I found myself over and over again, I'm not a great scientist. I'm not a brilliant thinker. I'm not any of those things. And I keep finding myself with these amazing people. And it's always for some silly reason. Like, I knew how to run a chainsaw, or I I like to tinker. And so I built a thing with a drill bit, and knew a guy at a metal shop, and we put it together into a new tool. And you don't have to be the best at anything. I think it's been really helpful to be curious, and then people need whatever it is that you have. Someone needs it. I think that's really true.
Oh. Just provide value, whatever it is.
Yeah. You
have a good time doing it.
Right. Exactly. The king of macroinvertebrates. That's what I'm.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So your titles that we see is you're an applied ecologist and a biogeochemist, and those are fun terms. I would love for you to define both of those and kind of relate them to why not just ecologist? Why not just chemist? Why not just biologist, geologist? What? Sure. How do those all kind of work together?
Well, so the idea of applied ecology is that, and this is kind of a dirty thing in academics, and I think, thankfully, not in the community of academics that I've come from, but the idea that the science that you're doing has real world applications to management, that it can help, in my case, land managers try to make better decisions about land, or informed decisions about land. And so there are sort of theoretricians, right, that are developing these grand theories. And in a lot of science, that's considered to be real fundamental science, right? That is real science. And then as soon as you put the word applied on it, then you're saying, well, I walk around in the woods and choose which trees to cut down, and it feels a little silly, right? But to me, that's important. I want my work to have direct applications to the real world. And so on the ecology side, that's about thinking about how human systems and these biological, ecological systems interact, and how our understanding of those biological systems then feeds, or ecological systems feeds management. And the biogeochemistry part, I mean, again, it's one of these things. I'm a biogeochemist? What? So another one of these things where I was walking to lunch with a mentor, and we were headed down to the food carts. And this guy, Mark Bradford, he said, Kris, you're the tree guy. What do you know about methane in trees? And I said, well, I know enough to know that methane in trees is not a thing, Mark. Let's move on. And he said, well, I have this photograph that says you don't know what you're talking about. And he pulled out his phone, and he showed me a picture of a flaming tree core that his postdoc had taken out working with students. The tree, they were coring trees that started hissing. And one of the students pulled out a lighter and lit it on fire. And I said, well, Mark, that's really cool. I'll ask around a little bit. And there were a couple of guys, one guy who's actually still a professor in New Haven, who rode his Harley across the country to take his first job there while Eisenhower was president. Oh, wow. They were the plant biology guys, him and Tom Sikkema, legendary field ecologists. And I talked to them both, and I said, what do you guys know about this? And they said, well, there's methane in trees. And there's some papers back there from the 70s on that. And that kind of sort of chance encounter and odd conversation, but Mark ended up bringing me onto this project because I could identify red maple, not because I know anything about biogeochemistry. that red maple tree, and I think it might be gassy because red maples tend to rot. And then there was an issue with picking the right drill bit to drill into the tree and get the gas out with, And so I ended up, that changed my whole career trajectory. I ended up studying methane in trees for 5 years. I'm still working on it. I say 5 years, but that was the heavy part, but I'm back at it now. Yeah.
Okay. We got macroinvertebrates, trees, soil inventory. So we're still collecting all the different things that you do besides just drill bits.
Drill bits may be the common factor.
There we go. Yeah, I was say.
Science needs laborers. Okay. But still, you do have all this knowledge. You did a study. Okay. So back to trees, a study that created a robust estimate for the number of the trees on the planet. How did you get involved in that?
Yeah. Amazing. Again, just being a random guy with one random piece of information. So we worked out of this lab building, Greeley Lab. I had a conversation with the then dean, Sir Peter Crane, wonderful guy, just brilliant and wonderfully supportive mentor. I was saying, I'm trying to buy an espresso machine for the lounge here in the lab. And he said, why are you doing that? And I said, well, I think if people have a really cool coffee machine, they'll hang out in this place and they'll share ideas and it'll draw people in and we'll create an atmosphere where cool things happen. And he said, all right, I'll buy the machine. And I wasn't asking him to buy it. And he was like, cool idea. I'll pay for that. I said, great. So we put the machine in and then we would have coffee time in there every day. And I was sitting across from this wonderfully dynamic guy, Tom Crowther, who now is sort of running an enormous research enterprise out of UTH in Zurich. But at the time, Tom was a fungal ecologist growing fungus in petri dishes. And Tom had a housemate, Gregor Hindler. And Gregor had done a project for a class where he had created this graph of sort of tree density. He had met a young kid, a German guy, now an adult, a doctor, a PhD, who had founded a nonprofit that was encouraging the UN to plant more trees and was interested in how many trees there actually were. So I think at the time it was maybe the Million Tree Campaign. And he was saying, or Billion Tree Campaign. He was saying, is this a lot of trees? How many trees are there, Gregor? You're at the Yale Forestry School. And he had this graph and Tom was really excited and he showed it to me and he said, we need to count all the trees. Look at this graph. I said, Tom, this graph just shows that big trees take up more space than little trees. This is really dumb. And he said, no, I think it's really cool. I think it's really exciting. And people are really going to want to know about this. And we spent about 2 days. We would meet and have coffee and play games. And he would tell me how exciting this idea was and how we needed to do it. He needed a forester and I finally just broke down and said, fine, Tom, if you want to do this thing, then we'll need to gather a whole bunch of ground plots, source plot data, and then build a remotely sensed or geospatial model based on that and try and spread that inventory out. And that's not necessarily my expertise, but that's definitely how I see people doing it. And, we have some folks, Charlie Bettigal, who's a wonderfully talented geospatial data scientist, was in the lab at the time and now actually runs the Center for the GIS, Interdisciplinary GIS Center at Skidmore. And I said, Charlie, you can get us started on this if you really want to do it. And then, we started gathering all this data. I remember Tom saying, do you think we could get 500 points or something? And I forget how many we end up with, but it's thousands and thousands.
Right.
And then we just started calling people, emailing people. Do you have data? Do you have data? We built that big model. We got that estimate, 3 trillion trees. Cover of Nature magazine, it's just crazy. It's crazy. And then I see it, I have students they're out in the field doing cruising timber and they take a picture of the inside of their Snapple bottle cap. It's on the inside of the Snapple bottle cap and it's in children's books that, end up in my daughter's hands. And it becomes this amazing thing off of we're playing games and drinking coffee.
That's amazing. I love that story. And I love that someone was just like, you go to the Yale School of Forestry, shouldn't you know how many trees there are?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's I think your point, you made that amazing point about like not feeling like you belong. And that's completely true. It's been true for me my entire career. And I think one of the things that was really different for me between my undergraduate education and then going for graduate school at a place like Yale is that when you walk into the door at a place like Yale, what they say to you is you are here because you have done really cool things and you have the potential to do a lot more cool things. And so can you please tell us what you need from us for you to achieve the next thing that you want to do? And you're on the team now and we're on your team and we're behind you, and we're behind you because you are going to do great things and we believe in you. And I think that just sets the stage for young people to do. And I wish someone had said that to me when I was 16, 15, right. 19. And so I think that's one of the things that I've brought away from that place to my teaching at Skidmore is to say to these young people, what is it you want to do? And tell me why it's really cool so that I can help you do that really cool thing.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I mean, offering that support, telling someone you believe in them is like huge as far as mentorship goes and just helping somebody. I've said that to somebody recently and they're like, why do you believe it? And I'm like, well, let me tell you all the reasons why. I don't just throw that out lightly. But it can make a lot of difference for someone. And also, I always tell people when they're like, oh, I got this job or I'm doing this thing and I don't feel like, I belong or whatever, I'm not good enough. I'm like, you're there. So someone thought you could do the thing. So just do the thing, figure it out and do it.
Yeah.
We doubt ourselves before anybody else does, just.
No one can see the fear inside you. Yeah.
So, okay. So many things.
I know, right?
You're teaching at Skidmore. You love research. What are you doing now?
Right now, I'm almost completely consumed with the soil inventory project. So
tell us about that.
Yeah. So after the tree counting paper, my dear friend, colleague, great, wonderful human, Charlie Bettigal, and I were working on a research center at Yale that was the Highplains Stewardship Initiative. And out of that, there was an incoming doctoral student that was really interested in soil carbon. We had all these ranchers out west that we work in, and we were supposed to be doing science that was going to help land managers better manage lands in the American West, which again, comical, because we would go out, we don't know anything, and we would just say, what do we do to help you? And they would say, well, what is it that you do? And we would say, well, we think we're pretty good at counting stuff, and they said, well, people are telling me I should be counting my soil carbon. They're telling me that I'm going to do better through droughts. They're telling me that I'm going to get access to some carbon market or that I'm going to be able to run more cattle. And I'm wondering if that's true. And so we set off, we said, we'll just go get some ground source plot data and we'll build a remotely sensed model. We'll be back to you in a few months. And of course, It's just not that easy. It's a tremendous challenge. We did not understand what we were getting ourselves into, which is also one of the wonderful things to do in life, right? Get out of skis it for a hot second. But we ended up working for a while with a little open source pocket spectrometer. And in the course of trying to feed that little cheap machine samples to parameterize these models with, I realized that a big part of the challenge is actually just getting geolocated dirt in a bag. We were spending a lot of money on hotel rooms, rental cars, conversations with ranchers about gate codes. And it was all about just getting to a spot and then spending a couple of minutes and putting the dirt in the bag. And then you do that for a while and then you get back on an airplane and you fly across the country. It just doesn't, there's got to be a different way to do it. So we started to look at both accelerating making the sample collection more efficient in the field, but also finding ways. So things like, where do you take the sample and how many samples do you have to take? Let's try and really solve that problem. Then once you get to the spot, can we make it really quick? What's the fastest I can get a sample? Do we need new hardware? Again, getting back to welding stops on drills and thinking about which kind of drill bit works in which kinds of soils and things like that. And at a certain point in doing this, I got this job at Skidmore and we got invited to go down to the Caney Fork Farm, which is Al Gore has a farm down in Tennessee. He grew up on this farm. He loves this place. He's transitioned to regenerative agriculture and is really interested in demonstrating, he and his team demonstrating that, regenerative agriculture can be productive and financially sustainable and can pull carbon out of the atmosphere and put it into soils. And their farm manager at the time, Zach Wolf, said, hey, how do we count this stuff? How do we really rigorously evaluate the outcomes from our regenerative management here? And I met a guy there named Bruno Basso, who runs a really high-powered modeling lab out of Michigan State University. He's one of the leading agricultural modelers in the world. He builds these incredibly complex systems for predicting forward and backward agriculture through time, has subfield yield maps for every agricultural field in the world. It's really an amazing scientific enterprise. And I said, wow, that would be really helpful. I've been thinking about how to get geolocated dirt in a bag, and if we could then scale our field observations using your models. He said, your geolocated dirt in a bag could be really helpful to me in parameterizing and verifying my models. Uh-huh. And so we started this enterprise together, and Mr. Gore was really excited that it was coming out of a thing we were doing together on his farm, and about the idea of the kind of feedback we were giving to his management team, that we could make that accessible to a lot more farmers and producers. And there are a lot of reasons why having these data is really important for management, a lot of reasons why it's really important for markets, a lot of reasons why a not-for-profit needs to be building larger scale inventories that those can be compared against. And so we've been working on a suite of field hardware, technical sort of builds, processes for moving samples through labs, mobile applications, web dashboards, and then integrating all of that into the models that Bruno is building so that we can build a system where you don't have to get on an airplane. It's sort of a 23andMe for soil, right? We send the kit out in the mail, the farmer, the rancher, or a consultant, whoever does the inventory. We do automated sampling design on the app. And then afterwards, we scale those up into regional inventories, and we hold those inventories as a nonprofit working in the public interest.
Oh my gosh, man. That's very, very, we've said this already. Super cool. Another really incredible thing you're working on. And like the whole time you're talking about this, I'm like, okay, I need this to be complete because I have a follow-up for you. So like one of the things that we do, I'm thinking about, I work in the consulting industry, right? So a lot of what we do is working with federal clients, governments to do very similar kinds of work really in that applied setting. So one of the challenges we have, the National Wetlands Inventory, if you're familiar at all with it, it is the nationwide database for wetlands. It is not a perfect database, I would say. It is a very kind way to put that. But, for example, this summer, I have 43 sites that I need to do sampling for wetlands inventories. And a lot of the time, I'm dreaming of ways to do this as efficiently as possible. Mm-hmm. So it's not quite the same as like your soil inventory. But that's the kind of thing that now I'm starting to think of an idea. How do we do something similar like that with wetlands? So,
and that's such a critical data set, that wetland extent data set. If you look at uncertainty, for instance, the global methane budget, that is largely in large part, I should say, driven by uncertainty in global wetland extent. And so starting to come up with a rapid way to quantify what, to map what is a wetland and what isn't, and to sample that out would be, and again, finding a way for all of this disparate data. There's lots of data out there, but how do we, there's a great E.O. Wilson quote about how we're drowning in data and we're starving for knowledge, and how to take that data and turn it into information that people can use.
Yeah, it's a real challenge, honestly. I think to kind of tease that out a little bit, it's basically, there's already been a ton of wetland surveys all over the whole country in many different areas, and there is not a single place for them to go. In some cases, there can't be. And I know we've actually talked to people who are trying to gather that information. But how do we solve a problem like that? How do we get all of this data in a central place that works, more efficiently than like a wetlands inventory?
Well, I mean, I think I'm about to sound like a radical socialist, very heavily centrist, but I think I say that jokingly, of course. But I think that these are the kinds of public goods that the government should be running and holding. And developing. And I think we see a lot of funding for this kind of thing coming out of the IRA and a lot of energy at the USDA and in the NRCS to build these public resources and maintain them, or to provide the resources so that non-governmental actors can step in and make that happen. We've seen a huge resource push. And I think there's something like, for instance, for soil carbon, I think there's $300 million in the IRA to start to build national scale data inventory repositories and modeling efforts to sort of be able to track that through time. So hopefully, and I believe there probably is a similar effort going on with wetlands. I know there's a whole team within the Global Methane Budget. Ben Poulter at NASA has done a bunch of work in trying to better resolve these wetland extent layers. That a lot of that is remote sensing and satellite kinds of observations. But that's really difficult. It rains and the wetland moves on you.
I know, right? Yeah. That's funny that you mentioned Ben. He was on the show. So
was he?
Yeah, for real. So we'll have to call him back and be like, "Hey, tell me about this wetland stuff."
Yeah. He's such a fascinating guy, and talk about a brilliant guy. See, this is the thing that I'm talking. I'm not Ben Poulter.
Oh, come on.
You know what I'm saying? I'm not Ben Poulter, but I bumped into him.
Probably as humble as you are, though. He does the same thing. I'm just a guy. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
Oh, that's so funny. That's so.
He's
funny.
launching satellites.
I mean, that's so great. And, it's funny though. I think one of the common threads we have for the show is people's experience in the field. And so we like to do a little mini segment here called Field Notes, where we ask our guests about memorable moments in the field doing the work. And yes, you already know where this is going. So please do share with us a fun or memorable story of you out in the field.
Yeah, I think, one that always comes to mind when I think it's a reminder of the fragility of the human condition.
Oh, yes.
On that, the Bhutan research just miracled into being something that was productive and worked out. But, when I first got there, I was sort of looking for a field site. I'm up at this research center in the mountains, drinking a lot of tea and eating biscuits and trying to figure out from people where I can go. And I get connected to this guy, but I've got to go from Boomtong to Thimphu and meet him. So I get on this bus, and I had been there for a while, and I had dedicated myself to, I'm going to just eat all the hot peppers they put at me, and I'm going to eat food wherever there's food. I'm going to be fine. Like, of course I am.
Right.
And the bus stopped halfway. It's a day-long bus ride, and they stop halfway. They make one stop, and I had some road food, as they call it. And then I got that night, I got terribly ill, as sick as I've ever been. And it was awful. And I thought, well, I'm going to die in this hotel room in Thimphu. I'm all by myself. Right. I'm going to die. They're going to find me the next day. And then someone will call my wife and tell her that I had road food. And, and so, but I was up all night. It was terrible. Really as sick as I've ever been, but I had to meet this guy at 7 a.m. the next morning. So he pulls up his truck outside, and I sort of hobble into the backseat of his truck. And I said, he said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Well, I had road food. I'm not sick. It's food poisoning." But he was leaving the next day to go to Australia to do his PhD. And so this was my one time to go up into the mountains and get introduced to this site. So he's bringing me up, and, he has to make a series of stops to talk to villagers about erosion control methods. And so he's walking me out into the field with them. I'm sort of hobbling. And then when we get to a stop, I'm just lying down in the grass and trying to keep it together.
Right.
And all of the locals are, "What is wrong with the chillub? What have you done to this chillub?" And then he, of course, just says the two words, "road food." And then they explode laughing. And they say, "Oh, chillubs should not eat road food. Why are you eating the road food?" And they're as I'm sort of rolling around moaning, they're saying, "Oh, chillub, don't eat the road food."
Yeah, come on.
Yeah. And we managed to get through to the site, but it was, that's about as low as you can get as a human, is sort of in front of a group of other adults that you don't know, right, from another culture, that you're trying to sort of present yourself as, I'm here and I have something to offer you.
Right, I have value.
And ridiculous.
Yeah.
and you can't even stop and have a roadside snack without shutting yourself down for 48 hours.
Yep.
You lived to tell.
Yeah.
You live to tell. Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny. That's a good one.
I have a similar story I'm not allowed to tell because I went to Cuba with a group of friends and I'm the only vegetarian, and we had an experience where I was the only one who didn't get sick because they all ate street food. I was like,
Binge.
Yep.
Go veg.
I have noticed, it's interesting when you travel in South Asia, it's veg and non-veg. So the default is that there's no meat in the food, right. Whereas we have it exactly the opposite. There's food and then there's vegetarian food. Right. And so the defaults are completely different.
That's a pretty epic story. Do you have another one in you? Do you have another?
Yeah, a field story.
Yeah.
I think Mark Bradford, who was the mentor who got me going on tree methane. I was in the woods with him one day and he was almost killed. And that we were gathering coarsewoody debris. And this was another one of those, he needed chunks of fresh wood, which he was going to use for a wood decomposition study, doing his, he was doing his super geeky thing that I barely understand now and certainly did not understand at the time. And I'm sure that if he were here and we were both talking about it, you would realize that I don't understand it. And he definitely does. But we had gone out into the woods. And so I was there because he needed me to identify these trees to species and then use a chainsaw to put them on the ground and then use a chainsaw to section them into little pieces. And so my part of this project was essentially to locate these trees within the forest that we were allowed to fall, that were going to give us the material that he needed to go forward with this study. And I think at some point I ran a bandsaw and a chipper or something. This is what I was supposed to do. Right. But I had felled a fairly large tree. And it had fallen. Everything was fine. It was laid out on the ground. And I think I was turning towards the next tree. We're a few minutes after that tree has hit the ground. And Mark's up working in the canopy, measuring chunks of wood and identifying areas where I'm going to make cuts. And the tree fall must have let loose a snag. But it didn't happen when the tree fell. We're minutes later. And a very large, very rotten, very wet beech snag fell over and it landed, I would say, within a foot of Mark. Yeah. And if this thing was maybe 8-10 inches around at the point that fell where he was. And I think about it once in a while because, a foot to the left or a foot to the right, and I'm making a phone call to tell Mark's wife that he's not coming back from the woods, right? And we're out joking, we're having such a great time, and we're, and for what? To get little pieces of, so that was a harrowing moment in the field for sure.
Oh gosh, yeah, I think we all have those moments, right? Like I remember, I'm doing my research with box turtles, and I have this radio, metal rod in my hands, trying to find these turtles. And I'm like a mile and a half into the forest, that I trekked in. So there's no quick way out. And I get to the wetlands area. So that now I'm in the open space and suddenly storm and then lightning is starting to strike all over the place. And I'm trying to run through a wetland, which you can imagine doesn't work. No. With this rod in my hands, just trying to get underneath trees, and you're just like, okay, all right. Wow. You get nervous.
And it feels really good to be here to tell the story, doesn't it? Right. And tell the story, it's really hard to convey the emotion of that moment to someone, but we all have our own, right? Wow, now that coin flips the other direction, and it's pretty bad.
Oh, I know. It's like if you can feel static electricity in the air where you are, it is not pleasant. It is not a pleasant experience. But oh my gosh.
Tell these stories though, because if you spend enough time in the field, you've got a near miss or something. You know what I mean? You got funny stuff, but then you also have whoa, that was a close one.
For sure.
I was just thinking that there was a different one that I can't remember if we talked about before, but I had taken students down to the Noble Research Center in Ardmore, Oklahoma. This is less a less harrowing sort of a teaching moment in the field where we had gone out to do these prescribed burns, which is really an amazing thing. You go down there and the students have got a drip torch in their hand and they're, burning 20 acres today. And that's really amazing. But the hosts, they're tremendous hosts and they're these super knowledgeable guys. But for our students, this is the first time that they're at a small liberal arts college in upstate New York. How much time do they spend in Oklahoma in pickup trucks with large men with cowboy hats and belt buckles, right? It's a totally different world they're going into. And this youngster, Sam, Sam's a teacher now. They've had dinner and he's holding this Coke can and he's looking for the recycling bin. He's sort of looking around lost. And my buddy down there, Jeff, says, "Oh, can I help you with something?" And he says, "Yeah, I'm looking for the recycling." And Jeff says, "Oh yeah, let me take care of that." And he pulls the can out of Sam's hand and he opens the lid of the garbage can and he throws it in. And he says, "We're single sort." And the look of terror on Sam's face at the idea that this can would be thrown in the garbage. And he's trying to balance that with the fact that he's just spent the day in the woods, with Jeff. And Jeff is brilliant and knows everything about that landscape. He believes in climate change, right? And he is a talented land steward and conservationist in the sort of Aldo Leopold legacy. And just to see him sort of say, "Oh, there are a bunch of different ways that people approach the environment and connect with it that are about more than my identity as a Northeastern liberal, protectionist and your identity as a Southern add in all of the things, right? So it's those kinds of experiences I think are really important. Those field experiences are important, not just about trees, but about connecting with other people in the field.
Oh, it's a great point. I think sometimes we forget, that people had different experiences and come from different places and had different ideas. And some of them are good and you never would have thought of them because of that. And it's a great, great point too. And there's been plenty of moments, I think, I can even think of being in a meeting and the proponent asks everybody where we're from. And then he says, "Good, you're all Southerners." And I was like, "Wait, what does that mean?" And he's like, "We got a dumpster out back." And I'm like, I don't think he was kidding. You know what I mean? Like, I don't
That's how I choose to understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Very, very great. All right, Laura.
Yeah. Well, we're out of time for the most part. However, you had something in your bio, not your bio, but our form we asked you ahead of time, like about moving rocks. Is that a thing where you just like, is that a real thing that you do?
It's a real,
as a metaphor? Or like...
No, it's a real thing that I do. And it's dumb, right? But it's what I like. I like to do most of my life, or my professional life, my entire professional life it's on Zoom, or it's talking to people in front of a classroom, or giving a talk here, or it's writing a paper, or it's a meeting, right? And I miss the more physical parts of being a human. And one of the things that I will do on weekends is move rocks. And as I've done that, it's my favorite thing to do. If my wonderful wife says to me, "Hey, like Saturday, you can do whatever you want to do. What is it? Like, I'll take Laurel and we're going to be biking. What do you want to do?" I want to go and move some rocks. And I've started trying to move bigger and bigger rocks using, I joke with my friends that we use only the wisdom of the ancients. And so like sleds, big stone boats and come-alongs and levers to move these rocks. And I think that at a certain point I realized, I'm moving some really large things and I'm in a place where it's really inconvenient to move them anywhere else. And I think it might be the most durable thing that I will ever do. My science really is, it's not whatever, like it's some PDF and, after our robot overlords remove our access to the internet, it will disappear. And, all of the other things that you do are pretty ephemeral. But I figured out that if you take a rock from a place of low utility, from the middle of the woods, wherever, side of the road, and you move it to a place of high utility into a wall, a set of stairs. I think stairs are really permanent. And if you do that, then they'll likely stay. And particularly if you move the rock from up on a hill, down a hill, I think this also makes your actions more durable. And so I have these conversations with myself in my head while I'm building these weird things off in the road. But I would encourage everybody to move more rocks. I think it's good for you.
That is so interesting. I think maybe you were like a pyramid builder in your past life.
Yeah.
Like I just have this need to move some big rocks around.
Ricky Gervais has that great bit about how everybody's always done something really cool in a previous life, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Pyramid builder sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else you want to talk about before we let you go?
I'm excited to chat with you guys more when we're done.
Awesome.
There we go.
Sounds great. Yeah. How much more time do we got? And finally, where can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, I hope folks will reach out if they like. I'm on LinkedIn, Christopher Covey. I'm Google through that's right. KRISTOFER, Christopher, last name Covey, Covey. But check me out on LinkedIn. Come over to our website, tsip.org. You can find me on the Skidmore page or email me there at Skidmore, kcovey@skidmore.edu.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks so much.
And that's our show. Thank you, Kris, for joining us today. Please be sure to check us out each and every Friday. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. See you, everybody. Bye.